Hello guys, I am going to go over your concept map with you real quick before you take your test today. So you want to get your packet out, open to page 7 of your muscular system packet, and we'll go through this. All right, so starting off here with the muscular system, we branch off first to our different types of muscle tissue. Number 1 over here, okay, this muscle tissue type is involuntary and it has a fusiform shape, meaning it is more spindle shaped. That should be your smooth muscle. Coming down to number 2 here, it is also involuntary, but it has intercalated discs and it's striated. Okay, I know there's a lot of crazy arrows going on here, but you should know that if it has intercalated discs, that could be your cardiac muscle tissue. And then your third muscle tissue type is striated. It's not connected to the involuntary, meaning it is voluntary, which would be your skeletal muscle tissue. All right, then we are going to keep following this path over here for skeletal muscle tissue. So these cells of this are not called muscle cells, but muscle fibers. Okay, good. And when we bundle a group of our muscle fibers together in a group, okay, that is called a fascicle. So then when we wrap that fascicle up in its own connective tissue wrapping, you guys can follow on your sheet down here that these muscle fibers have their own connective tissue. We'll get to that on the next slide. But the fascicles, this would be the middle layer. They are wrapped in their own connective tissue layer called paramecium. That's the middle one, paramecium. But then if we take all of those fascicles, take them all together, wrap them together, we get our whole organ. The very outside of that organ is wrapped in its own connective tissue sheath. And then that outer covering is what ends up forming the cord-like tendons, which would be your epimecium. Good. If you haven't already figured out, the connective tissue wrap down here is going to be not epimecium, but your inner endomecium. We'll get to that in a minute. All right. This number 11, you don't need to know. You don't even need to write it down, but it's called an aponeurosis. We didn't really talk about that, but just FYI. All right. And then we'll get to this other stuff here in a minute, but back up here at 6, the functions of the muscular system. This was your exit ticket yesterday, and you do need to know that for the test, okay? So one thing that your muscles do for you is they generate body heat. That's very important. Right now you're sitting up in your chair because your muscles are helping maintain your posture. It's also very obviously this is the one that's going to help you move, right? And we also have a very important job of your muscles are keeping these guys healthy by having muscles and not stabilizing your joints. And overarchingly, it doesn't matter if you're smooth, cardiac, or skeletal muscle tissue, all of them contract. So I know there's only 4 here, but there's really 5. And contracts just kind of a very general, broad sense. Alrighty, moving down to the next half of the page. Okay, reviewing here the muscle fiber. I mentioned it is wrapped in the connective tissue that we call endomecium. And then moving on, okay, to the organelles. The plasma membrane, okay, of our muscle fiber is called the sarcolemma. And the smooth ER, the endoplasmic reticulum of our muscle fiber isn't called endoplasmic reticulum, but it's called your sarcoplasmic reticulum. You can write it out, but I was lazy. I just wrote SR. All right. Coming back over here, talking about the microscopic structure of a muscle fiber. So the fundamental unit that contracts within our muscle fiber, it also starts with an S. This is your sarcomere. And you have your light band. It's called the I band. This one, remember, It's a thin letter. It only has thin filaments, so it has actin only. The dark band is the A band. It's thin on top, thick on the bottom. That is going to have both actin and myosin present in that. You could write actin only and actin and myosin underneath these if you find that helpful. Speaking of actin and myosin, the two types of filaments that we find in our actin and myosin. So first off, 17 here, which one of those two has troponin and tropomyosin attached to it? Remember, those are the big brothers. That would be actin. And then which one has the heads that are attached to them? That would be your myosin. Good. And they are going to be sliding past one another, okay, which is the theory of contraction. So how we describe how muscles contract, which is called the sliding filament theory. It's just this concept where troponin and tropomyosin get out of the way. When calcium is present, then the myosin heads can bind to actin, and then they slide past each other. That whole concept is called the sliding filament theory. Alrighty. So following back around, okay, with our flow chart here, we're going to jump here to muscle contraction. Okay, so this happens at a motor unit, which is where one neuron attaches to multiple fibers. If it's only a few fibers, it's a small motor unit. If it's many fibers, like thousands, that would be a large motor unit, like what you would find in your legs. But it's going to require a source of energy, which what molecule is our source of energy? That's ATP. Good. And we had 3 different ways of which we generate ATP in our bodies and our muscles. So we have CP, which stands for creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is going to be the fastest way and our muscles' preferred way of generating ATP. All it does is it takes ADP and takes the P off of creatine phosphate and hooks it to it, generating ATP. This is really relevant in individuals who might be doing weightlifting, some kind of exercise that is fast. Usually the duration of the exercise doesn't last more than 15 seconds. Then the other method of regenerating the ATP we lose is through anaerobic respiration. You should know that anaerobic respiration does not use what? Oxygen, okay? Anaerobic, without oxygen. And so this one is going to go through the processes of glycolysis and then lactic acid fermentation. This is going to be more so for a quick exercise that's usually over within 60 seconds or so. So the 400-meter dash is a good example of that. And then lastly, we have our oxygen using method, which is going to be aerobic respiration, where they're going to use oxygen. And this would be something for a more sustained activity that's going to last hours, and you have to be generating lots of oxygen, well, lots of energy for a long period of time. This would be you going throughout your normal day or even like a marathon runner. Okay, and then lastly here with muscle contraction at the neuromuscular junction where a muscle fiber and neuron meet, we have the muscle fiber and the neuron. The very end of the neuron is called the axon terminal. At the axon terminal, it's going to release this neurotransmitter that's very, very important. And that neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, or ACH. Really, that C should be capitalized. All right. That is it for filling out your concept map review. If you need a few more minutes to review, take that time now, but you're going to take your test here in just a second. Last thing I want to tell you, though, about your test, I accidentally printed all of the A versions on bright pink paper. So if you have bright pink paper, that's the A version. It still says version A in there. And there is one question twice on there, just accidentally. It's the exact same. So whatever you put for one answer, put for the other. If you end up getting that question wrong on the test, I won't count you off twice for it. You might have to remind me of that. But if you get it right, you can get it right twice. And I'll give you a hint. It has to do with tropomyosin. And what does tropomyosin do for your muscle cells? So make sure to review that. And then some of your answer choices are going to ask you to double bubble. So there might be more than one correct answer choice. The question will say that, or it will say like, this concept applies to more than one. It's a matching, and so you can match more than one option with it. All right, you guys are going to do